power meters have increased in popularity hugely over the last few years. Technology and price dropping has been a huge factor to that. And here we have 3 pedal-based power meters, one from Garmin, PowerTap and Vivero. And Michelle is going to take us straight into the power meters with her Garmin's.
Indeed, I've been using the Garmin Vector 3, which is Garmin's 3rd attempt at their Vector pedals. There's a single-sided version as well, which is the Vector 3S. I mean, these have changed dramatically since the Vector 2s. With the Vector 2s, there was a pod on the outside of the body, which meant that you had to get the torque exactly right, and also it just meant that body was quite vulnerable. Now it's all in one unit, means they can be lighter as well. They're just generally a lot sleeker looking too. They look great. They look like just a traditional pedal, don't they? Yeah, and they're pretty resilient. This winter I've ridden through pedals that actually had ducks in them, and I've had no problems whatsoever. So I know that these are pretty long lasting. Nice. Rupert with the Viveros.
Yeah, so these are the Vivero Assioma Duos, as you might expect. The single-sided ones are called the Unos. They're an Italian brand, and these are, yes, the dual-sided power meters, and they are different to the Garmin's because they do have a pod on the inside. There is no torquing required, which is nice. You just whip them on easy as you like. And other than that, it's just a normal pedal. If you didn't look at that, you would just have a normal, pretty much a look platform here. Underneath. So, they are doing things a bit differently than both the PowerTaps and the Garmin's.
Definitely. And I've got, as Rupert points out, the PowerTap P1 pedals. Again, these have a single-sided options, the P1S's, but these are a little bit older now than the 2 you have here, and I think that shows a little bit in the housing, and they're quite big and bulky, as you can see here. But a very reliable product, and I've enjoyed testing these actually. They've been good so far. And I think that leads us nicely into what we want to talk about, which is the pedals, and firstly, what you get when you purchase your pedals, whether that's the PowerTaps, the Viveros or the Garmin's. And I think it's all much for muchness really. You will get a nice black box like this with a set of cleats, which are look style. The PowerTap ones aren't technically look Keo cleats, but they do fit in just about. But you get one 6-degree set of red cleats, as you do with the rest of the pedals?
Yes. In the Viveros, you definitely get the red look style cleats, but you also get a battery charger, because unlike the other 2, the Assioma Duos are actually a rechargeable battery, which is a definite plus, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Well, with the Power P1s, you get a AAA battery for each, which is lithium and not alkaline, which they say do not use with this product. Okay. And Garmin's, I assume, come with batteries as well?
Yes, you get LR44 batteries. You can use SR44, but Garmin do recommend that you're better off using LR44. It lasts a little bit longer, which are mega easy to change as well. So there's literally just a little Allen bolt here. You just unscrew that, change it, and it takes like 2 minutes.
Because I do think that's really important, especially if you go on holiday a lot or you ride abroad a lot and you suddenly run out of batteries. It can be a nightmare if they're particularly difficult to get hold of. So being able to recharge them is a particularly good thing, I think, although you do have to remember to take your charger with you on holiday.
Definitely.
Yeah, don't forget that.
The other things you get in the box is a set of spacers. For the P1s, it's just for carbon cranks. Aluminium cranks, you don't need to use the spacer at all. And this does change the Q factor slightly. But we're talking about millimeters here, and it's something we were talking about just before, wasn't it? That each one, I think, offers slightly different Q factor, but it's a millimeter here, a millimeter there. And obviously that Q factor will change if you're using a set of Cannondale SI cranks or a set of Dura-Race cranks, or your bike is your winter bike and it's old school with a narrow bottom bracket. Or
to put it into perspective, I think with these you're getting 53 to 55, and with yours you're getting, what, 54. So you add that one spacer and you're basically back where you started.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's the same for the Vivero.
Yeah, it is. Very minor adjustments, really.
But moving away from what we have in the box, that's where the slight subtle differences comes in, and especially with the actual pedal itself. So weighing in at 428 grams for a pair, including battery, that's important, are the Power P1 pedals, which is quite weighty.
That is quite a lot, isn't it?
But you can see it's quite a large product. But compared to you guys with the Garmin's and the Viveros, Viveros are winning hands down.
Absolutely, yeah, they're a featherweight pair, really. So there are 299 grams for the pair, 149 grams each, which is super light, really, when you think about it. I guess it's all about how light they've been able to make the sensor pod, and then the pedal is just a very lightweight pedal. And it's a big thing, they claim it on their website, you know, these are some of the lightest power-based pedals you can get. So if you really do care about weight, then that is a definite thing to consider.
And the Garmin's are coming in.
Sitting in the middle, they're what they call the claimed weight of 316. We weigh them in at 325, which isn't really far off.
The differences continue from there, from the weight. And for example, the Power P1s and the stack height is probably the highest we have here, 14 millimeters at the moment. Oliver Bridgewood, our resident presenter and tech writer, has been using these mostly for time trialing, and he's found that it does affect his saddle height quite a bit. And adding a slight, I think it's around 6 mils, it adds to the upper, which means he has to raise his saddle 6 mils more, and it sort of adds to your CDA really, and you know, you're a bit out of whack.
And especially if you're really into numbers, that is going to really affect you.
Definitely.
Especially in something like time trialing. You can't be.
And I think if you look at the pedal, and you know, we'll try and zoom in here, but it is quite a girthy product, and compared to the Garmin's, for example, you know, which looks like
they're very sleek looking, aren't they? They're very swish.
Yeah, the Garmin's bring it down right to 11.5, which is not that different to your average standard pedal, and you wouldn't feel that, you know, when cornering, you're not going to sort of be losing out really in terms of how much clearance you've got at all. But the clearance on it is 31.7, which is pretty decent really compared to, say, I don't know what the power tap.
Yeah, the clearance is, well, the degree of angle that you can lean over is like 25.5, I think, which is the lowest here. But you can really see that with, like, you know, the battery at the bottom. And I think from day-to-day riding, you won't notice that too much. But, you know, like you, Michelle, and you, Rupert, hopefully in the future, will start doing lots of crit racing. If you're pushing the limits.
That's my next step, I think, yeah.
If you're pushing the limits, or, you know, you're trying to catch the wheel in front, and you're going to pedal one stroke too early.
You pedal in a corner that you shouldn't
You're
pedal
kind of like, you're going to strike it, unfortunately. But I must mention that these have been struck a number of times.
Right.
They've withstand, you know, quite a bit. But we'll go into that
They're built
bit.
for it.
We'll go into that a bit later.
Jumping back to the Asiomas in stack height, they're really very low, 10.5 mil. So, like, you're not really going to notice any difference, I don't think.
That'd be mainly because the pod's on the outside, so you haven't got to build
exactly.
anything.
It's not built in to the actual pedal body, and corner clearance is 27, so somewhere in between the two here. So, you know, sits in its own place really, but for people who don't want to mess around with their stack, if they're really into their numbers and they just don't want to mess with their setup, again, this is looking like a good option for them.
I think looking at the pedal and, like, speaking about the hardware and the final thoughts on the three we got here, is that the P1s are the ugliest. You know, without doubt, they're a chunky bit of hardware, and, you know, there are sleeker designs that we have here.
I think so. The Garmin's especially look very slick. When they released these, we first saw them way back at Eurobike, and we've had them floating around the office now. You look at them and they are really impressive.
They
the
just
way
look
they've
like
contained it all. Yeah.
They just look like a standard pedal really, whereas I think the Vivero, although the pedal itself looks pretty normal, you have still got that kind of UFO-like pod sitting on the end that doesn't really blend in.
Yeah, when it's on the bike, you kind of are able to forget about it a little bit.
But everybody else isn't.
But, well, yeah, if everyone else is looking at it, they can't forget about it. But when it's off the bike like this, it is, and when you hold it, it's obviously weighted towards that, so you can feel it going a little bit. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning, especially for people that ride Shimano cleats a lot, is this actually, you wouldn't think it does, but it does feel a lot different on the shoe. And I especially find this because it's a look style, smaller, and it's often a smaller platform. And it's worth taking into mind because if you buy a power meter pedal, you're going to be committing yourself to riding that style of pedal.
Yeah.
And I think it is worth bearing in mind that if you do ride a Shimano style pedal, you are going to have, that is going to be a change that you might feel. I certainly felt it. It just feels, it's a smaller platform underneath the shoe. The cleat feels a little bit different on the bottom of the shoe. And it's just something to bear in mind.
But Shimano isn't a world away from look, whereas people are using speed plays, particularly if they've had knee injuries in the past and they've dialed those in perfectly. That's the end of that, really. There isn't an option for them.
Definitely, definitely. But I think in terms of the pedal and the way it looks and feels and what you get, I think the Garmin's are edging it here.
I think so. They do look good.
So fitting the Garmin Vector 3s, it was the first time I've ever used a pedal-based power meter, and it was just a revelation. You just put them in like you would any other pedal. In this case, you have to use a pedal wrench because you can't use an Allen key because that bit's blocked off.
That's where the LED lives.
Exactly, yeah. But still, once they're in, everything, just away you go. Everything was so easy, and I could swap between all my different bikes, road bike, track bike, TT bike, job done. Whereas in the past, I've had a wheel that I might not want to use the same wheel for training as racing, evidently, and all the other reasons that go alongside that.
Once we're on the bike, how are we communicating with a computer?
Through lots of flashing. That's
I've
what this
noticed
does. Yeah, mine, if you've probably seen it, that I've been spinning them around and they're just blinking wildly.
But they keep blinking whilst you're riding as well, because I tried these as well.
Yeah.
And I looked down and I was like, is something wrong?
There is a disco on my bicycle.
It is.
Yes, they do blink all the time when you're riding. And the only blinking I've been able to work out so far is that when you backpedal, that is putting them in pairing mode, and then they pair to your head unit. So I'm using a Wahoo Element at the moment, pairs very quickly. Although not without its problems.
I was going to point this out.
Yeah, and so you, like you say, you have used these as well, and we both had this problem. So with the Asiomas, the right pedal is a slave to the left pedal. So the left pedal is the one you want to pair your head unit to, but you also have the option to pair to the right pedal, which was coming up faster on my Wahoo Elements head unit. So I was pairing to the wrong pedal, which was giving me just wrong data. I was doing like 13 watts, which I can do more than, I promise.
I'm sure you can. I've seen the data. It doesn't lie. Yeah. But usually at this point, I would say, Rupert, you bloody idiot, mate.
Yeah.
But I did exactly the same thing. And I was out on my ride, and it was a headwind, it was slightly slogging uphill, and I was looking down at my computer, and I was like, no way can I be putting out such little power.
And it was swinging from tiny numbers to like a bit more normal. So it was swinging from like 13 to 120 down to 48 up to 72. It was and anywhere in between. And then looking at the graph when I got back this on it, and I was like, that's not right.
Yeah.
So we contacted Favero, who were very quick to point out that we probably are in fact idiots. And if you wait a bit longer, well, it's not about waiting a bit longer. It's about on the Wahoo, it says power, and you click on that, and then you have to go through that, and then the left-hand pedal appears, and it has a serial number after it, and that is the one you want to pair to. And once you've done that, it's good. Like we were getting good numbers, far more accurate, still not as high as I would like, but that's not an accuracy problem. That is a me problem. But yeah, it's after that they were given good readings, and it was fine. But it is worth knowing that, that especially if you are new to this and it's a technology you're not used to, that could be quite complicated to get through.
It's probably worth trying to rename the power meter,
Yeah.
I think, and I think that is an option through their own app. But unlike the Faveros, the Power Tap P1s are hardwired, hard paired out of the factory once they come out of the factory. So you can only connect to one power meter, and between the two, they are connected permanently. So you can't interfere with that. So you should only get the one option to pair with. And as far as I'm aware, the master pedal is the left, and the right-hand side is the slave. And that's pretty similar to the Garmin's, I think.
Exactly, yeah, the Garmin's are exactly the same. I think you can force de-pair them somehow, but you could never use them separately. So you wouldn't be able to connect just to the left or just to the right. You're always connected to them as a pair. And yeah, again, the left is the master.
So although the P1s are good at setting up easy, calibration is very simple, as they all are, they do fall asleep very quickly.
Like you.
Like me, yeah, funnily enough. And they take a good few seconds to get going again, a lot like me. So a few of our testers have found that, from the start line, when they really need their power to get up to a certain wattage and they want to sit at, they found that nothing's happening, and that's when panic starts, and you start to go over your...
In a time trial, if you weren't sure where you were at and you just end up going too hard at the beginning, then we could skip the whole point of doing that.
But
time
it's something
trial.
I've noticed with all the pedals, and I'm sure you guys who have spent much more time with each individual more than I, that there is a slight delay with the power meter pedal all together, compared to the likes of crank-based and maybe HUD-based as well. There is a bit of a delay, so it's something to bear in mind. But especially with the P1s, just make sure they haven't gone to sleep just before the start line.
Yeah, although the Asiomas I think are I mean, there's a little bit of a lag, but they're not bad. Starting from traffic lights, because these do go to sleep after a couple minutes. They go to standby, but they're quite quick to fire up. But like you say, it's that, is it an accurate reading because of that lag? It fires up because you're out the saddle trying to get away from a light, and then it drops down again because you're easing off, and it's kind of, you don't know where you are because of that little bit of a lag.
Yeah. With the Garmins, they fall asleep after 4 minutes, but they usually start within seconds. So the only people that would really have a problem would be track sprinters if you're in the starting blocks, and you want that, because that first effort, that is going to be your biggest effort. So you care if you haven't got those first couple of seconds. But in a time trial, your first couple of seconds, if you're staring at the power, if you're staring at your screen in like the first 3 seconds, you're probably looking in the wrong place. So I'd say you should be all right.
Yeah. But in terms of the preset crank length for the P1s, it's 172.5, which I think is fairly standard across the board.
Yeah, I think that's the most common, isn't it? That was certainly the case with the Asiomas.
And they can be changed via the app if needs be, which I'm pretty certain is the same for Garmin and for the Veros.
Yeah, the same for this as well, yeah. Nice. So easy enough to do.
Moving on to compatibility and software, and I think we're going to try and damage the armour of the Garmin pedals here. Because I think this is where they start to fall down a tiny bit.
It's true, they did have some problems, because I initially tested these with the Garmin 1030 and I thought they were the bee's knees, they were incredible and everything was perfect. And then I think you tried them with a Wahoo. So Garmin have built in cycling dynamics, which shows you left-right balance, how much time you're spending in and out the saddle. Shows you pedal offset, so how far, where your cleat is over the pedal, which would be really useful if you're a bike fitter or have really good knowledge of bike fit. And also peak power phase, so like where you're putting the most power through the pedal stroke, which is all really useful stuff that actually a lot of the pedals do, but a couple of those things are unique to Garmin. And they show up if you're using a Garmin. Unfortunately, if you're using a Wahoo, you lose a lot of that data, which means that if you're paying £850 for the double pedal, you kind of think, well, you might as well go for the single pedal where you don't get those things if you're not going to get them anyway.
But to be fair to Garmin, that coding, that software is available to the competitors like Lezyne or Wahoo, but those guys haven't quite adopted that into their system just yet. With the P1s, I mean, everything's open. You can use it with the Garmin, which we have done, with the Wahoo, which we have done, and it gives you torque effectiveness, pedal smoothness, left-right balance, which isn't very good on Rupert, apparently.
It was fine, thank you.
Pedaling like this.
Yeah, apparently.
Sliding around
all over the place.
But as compatibility goes, I mean, I must confess, like the PowerTap dual computer is not very good. I haven't used the P1s with that, but with the Wahoo Element Bolt, which I've been mainly using it for, the stats you get from the uploads are more than I need. There's graphs that overlay and show you the comparisons, which is really good. And the firmware as well for the P1s is very important to update both your computer and your power meter for compatibility across the board. Their app is very simple and very basic, but I think we were discussing before that that's actually quite a good thing because you don't need it for anything else other than keeping yourself up to date. And via the Bluetooth connectivity, it's a double. And
this is something I'd be interested in with the Garmins, because Garmin uses, you've got Garmin Connect, Garmin Express, and then you've got these pedals, and if you use a Garmin head unit, you'll know that it feels like every other day you're being fired a firmware update to patch through to it. And is that the same with the pedals? Are they sending firmware updates often, or have they got it pretty nailed?
No, I've
straight
not.
out?
I've not been. I've not been asked to do any firmware updates for the time I've been using them. If you do need to do them, they are Bluetooth as well as Ant Plus enabled, so you can do it either on the Garmin unit or via your phone as well, as long as you've got Garmin Connect. The one bit of firmware update that we would really like is for Bluetooth Smart, which currently, although they're capable of it, they won't actually be able to work with platforms like Zwift, where you need Bluetooth Smart until a firmware update has taken place. And Garmin has not really given us a date as to when that's going to happen. So that again is one point where they do fall down, unfortunately.
Okay, so they're not compatible with Zwift.
The actual pedal itself is, but the software is not. So at some point there will be an update, in which case, so they'll become compatible. At the moment, won't work.
Sure. Okay.
And these two do work with Zwift because I've used them
Okay.
with that platform.
Sure.
But all three do use Ant Plus, so you can use a dongle. Just means you've got to purchase a dongle.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, you've just fired through software updates from the app for these, which is nice and easy to do. And using it with the Wahoo, like you say, you got all the nice charts in a handy place right on the app, which unlike the Garmin, you'd end up in the bog that is Garmin Connect trying to, no, I've not been playing water polo, let me look at my cycling dynamics, and then, So that is nice. Simplicity is key, I think,
definitely.
really.
And I
More so
noticed-
for some than others.
Yes, all right.
And talking of accuracy, how are we on that front?
So Garmin promise plus or minus of 1%, which is what most power meters do, which, to be clear, is itself compared to itself. So that's not plus minus one of like the absolute of wattage, because there isn't really an absolute, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you're not, you're comparing apples with apples, not apples with bananas. And yeah, I mean, I found them to be pretty true. So when I felt like I was doing 250 watts, I was doing 250, I was always getting the right kind of numbers. I was getting what I expected. And I did use them with a power tap hub as well, just to compare the two. I found over 20 minutes, there was like a 4 watt difference, which is pretty minor really. And that is because, which should be the case across all pedals, is that you're not losing anything through transmission, which you are when you use a hub.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus or minus 2%. So that is a lot different to the Garmin. But like you say, when it felt like I was working blooming hard, it was giving me numbers that would suggest that. But it is...
All of those 13 watts.
Yeah, into a headwind. It's actually just going nowhere.
And the P1's 1.5, so in between the two, really. The main thing I find, or you should find with your power meter, is that it's reliable and it's not dropping out, or there's no weird major 2000 watt spikes anywhere. And I think if you look across the board of rides, or a month's worth of rides with the P1s, you won't find any inconsistencies there, which I think is a very good plus point for the P1s, that they have remained solid throughout the test period.
And it's, you can trust that data, and that every time you hop on there, it's going to be giving you a reading that is reliable.
Yeah.
Which is just really important.
Yeah, and I think it's quite important for the pedals as well, because they do get a kicking. They service a lot of mileage. They get abuse. You're basically stamping on them and then kicking them, trying to get your cleats clipped in, and you're clipping them, especially in the case of the P1s. And the unit has remained robust and has carried on working quite well. But what are they like to live with? What are you guys experienced with your pedals? What are the niggles that the readers and viewers should worry about? Yeah,
so with the Viveros, I like that it is like a pedal. I like that it's minimal stack height. It's easy enough to use. I have had a bit of a niggle with the tensioning system, in that doesn't really do what it says when I'm I was trying to loosen it off a little bit after I almost just fell into a car the other day. So I was like, I'm going to dial that off, but it in fact didn't do a vast amount, which is a pain when you used to Shimano, or to be honest, any pedal where you just dial it off, and you do dial it off.
Yeah.
That was a pain for me. But other than that, I like the rechargeable battery. That's a nice touch.
That's a big plus point.
Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
Vivero was saying as well that the rechargeable battery is hugely more reliable than the coin cell or the AAA battery of the P1s. And you can actually get a reading that should be correct. So if it's 60%, it's 60%.
Yeah.
And they're saying that the other types of batteries don't quite give you that accuracy of, oh, I'm a bit low, but I could get away with a ride.
Yeah.
But I found with the P1s, especially over time, and going into the sort of body and the makeup of the pedal, is that the aluminium they use for the battery housing isn't that good. It's a very soft aluminium, so you've got to be really careful not to over tighten them or be a bit too aggressive there, because once you round it out, we've all been there, mechanical disasters, and you've rounded something out and you're sitting there going, what the hell do I do now? And it's the same for these. And that in the past, especially the earlier models, they had real problems with leakages around this area and batteries leaking. And as I said before, they don't recommend using anything other than lithium batteries, which aren't the easiest to come by. And is sort of a negative point, really. Yeah. So although sort of everything should keep working and keep going, the battery is a bit of a weak point of the P1s, and plus it adds that huge bit at the bottom.
Enormous,
It's just a big,
Yeah.
clunky pedal, which is a bit of a downside to the P1s.
Michelle?
Using these has just been incredible for sort of getting power data so easily. But that, I guess you could apply that to any power pedal. The major stumbling blocks have been the compatibility with other head units, which I personally wasn't a stumbling block because I've always used Garmin. But if you wanted to use a different computer, it'd be a bit of a problem. The actual the platform itself I've found really good. So the kind of connection is really strong and way stronger than the pedals I was using before. And actually having tried the P1s as well, I found that those were, because they're not technically with my look cleats that I was using, I didn't find the connection was quite as strong, and I could feel a bit of wiggle room, which was a little bit, it wasn't a problem, but it was just a little bit annoying.
Yeah.
Changing the battery has been really, really easy. I wouldn't say the aluminium was soft, so I'm not worried at all about rounding the bolts, but you are screwing a metal piece into a plastic body, which has always been a bit of an issue with me. I just don't think it's very smart, because at some point it might go wrong. So that wasn't great. Getting hold of batteries was really easy. So I got a set of 10 batteries, and you're using 4 a pop. So I got 10 batteries for £5 online, which was I think that's all right. But I would say I've had them for a bit over a month, and they already needed 1 battery change. Thing is, I can't tell how long those batteries have been sitting in there, if they've been sitting on a shelf for a really long time. So it's possible that could be forgivable.
Sure. But the Garmin do claim 120 hours?
Something like that, yeah. So I'm not sure how many hours of riding I've done over the last month. That would be hard to figure out. Yeah, I'd be chugging the miles down, right? So probably, that seems a bit ambitious, but it could be, because it's the first battery, I'm kind of tempted to be a bit lenient, because I think, well, it could have been sitting on a shelf for a really long time, or they've just not used the best batteries. So I bought Duracell, go with the bunny, should be fine.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it would not surprise me if there were some, like, the batteries weren't quite as good when you buy them. It's the type of thing where you do have to upgrade them when you go in. Immediately looking at the Garmin's, I like the fact that it does look like a bit of a wide platform, which I do really like. I like that support under my foot. So that really appeals to me with these, compared to these are a bit narrow, and the PowerTap ones just look tiny. Like, that is such a tiny platform to have under your feet. Some people like it, but it's definitely not for me.
But lastly, with the P1s, and again, a slight negative, I've loved the sort of reliability of this unit, but it's the engagement and the cleats. And as you say, they're not quite look Keo, but they're kind of the style. And being a Shimano man with the SPDSLs, I'm a bit biased against it. But even with the pedal, like, they sit a bit back, and like engagement isn't quite there. Shimano are very good at making sure everything's
pedal is
ergonomically
weighted perfectly, and
exactly.
I'm hearing you. This is exactly the same problem I've been having with these. Like, sits so far back, and then if you miss it, because I'm usually like you, I ride Shimano. this has been a difference for me, so I've maybe not clipped in quite as perfectly. And if it just keeps going and going and going and going, and then you end up like mashing on the top bit because you're trying to get away from a car behind you.
And you're looking at your pedal when it's doing this, isn't it?
You're looking down. You're like, oh my god, I can't get it on. And then that has been frustrating me, I must say. And it's not easy, or if you're not used to it, and then you just spin in, and it's just a nightmare, really.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But the one thing we haven't spoken about is price. So P1s, £850, which is actually pretty decent, I think.
Yeah.
And has come down quite a bit recently, right?
It has, yes. Well, with the Garmin's and their introduction of the new Vector 3s, I think they had to, really, because they were sitting about £1,000 not too long ago.
That is a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is a lot. Yeah, well, the Faveros are well under that. So on Favero's site, they're about €800, but I've found online you can get them for about 700, 720 quid. And you can also get the Uno, which is the one-sided power meter pedal, for €499. So it is sitting under that, and I also think sitting under the Garmin's.
Yeah, the Garmin's are 1 penny cheaper than PowerTap, so they're at $849.99 for a double, or $499.99 for a single.
Yeah, just to clarify, the P1 single-sided, the P1S's are £500. But yeah, very interestingly, a penny more expensive.
Which is interesting because PowerTap brought that price in after Garmin, so you would have thought they'd go for $849.98.
Yeah.
But apparently not.
Hold on.
Maybe they don't quibble over pennies.
That's number one.
But yeah, I think with the PowerTap P1s, I'm very happy with them. On the bike, whilst riding at least, they're not very offensive. But looking at the bike and looking at them now, you know, they're a big unit, and there's a few issues that come with that, you know, pedal striking, stack height, you know, the battery in the housing is a bit weak, although that has been improved over time. You know, it does add a bit of negativity to this, although it's competitively priced, but it's hugely reliable, and, you know, I've had no problems with using them and ensuring that my data is, you know, correct and there. So in terms of, you know, usage and reliability, I can't fault the P1s.
And, you know, that is key at the end of the day.
Definitely with power meters.
The Faveros, there is a lot I like about the hardware, for sure. So I like the slim pedal look, and it is just like riding a normal pedal. I like the fact that everything's contained in this that sits close to the crank. I mean, you just have to look at how filthy these pedals are, but then this feels quite safe almost away from that. And it is waterproof. It's got a good waterproof rating. I like the fact you don't have to torque anything. You just whip them on. But from like after that, like the platform's a bit small. This spinning is very annoying.
Yeah.
And just the whole, when you try and set them up, you kind of don't know where you are. Things are flashing at you. You connect to the wrong pedal. There's not a huge amount of guidance. The app is quite basic, so you kind of think, well, maybe if I go there, you'll find something out. You don't find anything out by going to the app.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's great. Some ways, it's a curse. Sometimes setting these up, you kind of feel like you're kind of out at sea a bit without really knowing what you're doing. But, you know, other than that, I like them. Once I navigated those problems, I found them to be pretty good.
Yeah, it's a nice idea, I think.
It is,
It's a step away from what these guys are doing, almost. Yeah. And the rechargeable battery is
rechargeable battery is great. They're undercutting the price. So if, you know, they take on some of like new ideas and sort some of these things out, I think they'd be sitting on a really good product.
I mean, I've loved using the Garmin's. It's the first time I've been able to use a power meter, the same power meter, well, a power meter at all, across like road racing, plus track, plus training. And no, it's completely reliable because I'm always using the same power meter. I mean, the body is fantastic. It looks like a normal pedal, and it works like a normal pedal. It connects like a normal pedal. And since I've always been a look user, so there's no difference to me, and it feels exactly like it should do. I mean, the only potential stumbling block really is if you're not using a Garmin head unit, but I am, and so are an awful lot of people. Yeah. So for lots of people, it's just a non-issue, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, it's really hard to fault them.
personally, I think you would agree, Rupert, that we're all leaning towards the Garmin's here as the better product all round. Yeah. I think there's pros and cons with all of them. The Garmin's are edging it here, but I feel that in defence of the PowerTap P1s and the Faveros, the Garmin's are the latest product. They're the most recent technology. So the updates potentially that we could see from PowerTap and Favero could quite easily rival what Garmin's are doing. But right now, as we're speaking, I think we're very happy with the Garmin.
And just also, kudos to Garmin to bounce back from the old Vectors to just taking it in-house and being like, you know what, no, we need to get this right. Let's take it into our own home. We'll work on this ourselves. And then coming out with a product that is this good, I think is just deserves to be applauded, really.
Cool, thanks guys, and well done to Garmin. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe our YouTube channel. And if you want to see anything in particular going head-to-head or a versus, then please do comment and tell us what you'd like to see. Until then, see you next time. Are you going to come in?
Yeah.
Was that okay?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I've just forgot my... I was thinking about it so much, I forgot about it.
And the price is dropping.
That's right. You changed it up.
I know. Come on, Henry. Rupert. There's a very...
What?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Crack on.